Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Nightmare Theater. And Happy New Year, by the way, 2021. I lost my train of thought already. But basically, today on episode 13, we're going to be talking about the purpose of nightmares. So, trying to get into some of the theories or biological reasons for why we have dreams and nightmares, evolutionarily speaking. After that, we're going to be discussing some nightmares from Reddit, and that's all. We don't have any viewer-submitted nightmares this week. But without further ado, let's get into this presentation. Cool. So, this is going to be a bit of a shorter presentation. And you may recall in one of the earlier episodes I mentioned that dreams and nightmares may have some function in the processing of memory. It turns out that even this much isn't really a certainty. And nevertheless, I did my best to compile different theories as to why we dream. So as mentioned, we still aren't sure. But looking deeper into the processing of memory. So, in sleep, the brain decides what short-term memories to forget and which to commit to long-term memory. And some studies indicate that the more things we learn during a particular waking day, the more we tend to dream. So I think the specific study was on people who were taking language classes versus not taking language classes. Now, I don't know what all the other controls were, but they found that the people taking language classes would tend to dream more at night than those who weren't learning anything new, or at least weren't taking the language classes. One of the things that makes this so difficult to verify, though, is that we don't even really fully understand how memories are stored at the molecular level, and even what we do understand, we can't just dissect a person's brain after the fact, and it's difficult to do animal studies, right, because you can't verify that they are actually having dreams, so it's sort of the other problem in that case. But in the human brain, there is no memory bank like in a computer. Memory, processing, and cognition are all interspersed throughout the brain, making it even more complicated to study. And we actually know more about the storing of memory in the human brain than I thought we did. And I was kind of starting to read into that, and then I thought, this is too far off topic, Sandor. So I just kind of reined it in a bit. But if there's enough interest for that, even though it's not really related to nightmares, I'd be down to do a topic like that in the future. There's other research showing that not for dreams and nightmares, but for sleep in general, that there's a role that plays in the processing of memory. So in a study by Fihal and Born in 2008, they showed that declarative memory, which is a type of long-term memory that involves conscious recollection. So like, what was I doing like on this day 3 years ago? That type of thing. And they measure that in the study via performance on a pair associated lists. So I think that is things like, green is 1, red is 2, orange is 3. And then the next day, after some sleep, they see how well you remember that based on what area of the sleep cycle they awake you in. And they're measuring that as you sleep, so that's how they guarantee the right thing. And that's in the early part of the sleep cycle, so not when dreaming would occur. Obviously, as we know, dreaming occurs in REM sleep primarily, which is at the end of the sleep cycle. But they also found that... sorry, let me find my spot. Procedural memory, which is unconscious long-term memory. And so a better example of this would be things that you kind of know how to do when you're in the situation, but that you couldn't actually explain to someone. So an example of this for me would be, there are things in my lab, like isolating crypts from a mouse intestine, that I mean, I could explain to you how to do it, but there would be like details left out that in the lab, if I were in the middle of doing it, I would remember. So that would be an example of declarative memory. No, procedural memory. Sorry, I just mixed them up. So in the study, though, they measure procedural memory with things like mirror tracing skills test, which is something like repeating a drawn pattern after awaking in the later phase of sleep. So during late sleep, this is the one that's more likely to be associated with dream, right? Because this processing of memory is occurring in the REM phase of the sleep cycle. So again, though, we can't really say that it's the dreams themselves in REM sleep that are contributing to this. All that we can say is that both REM sleep and procedural memory seem to get, a boost during dreaming in REM sleep and procedural memory both seem to occur during REM sleep. So we don't really know what the association is between dreams in this case. The second theory for why we have dreams and nightmares is for the processing of emotion. So dreams reflect our emotions, which certainly seems to hold some validity with nightmares, as we've seen in these nightmare interpretation things, which, like imagining that you're waking up late for a test and you're all anxious about that, and that obviously ties into a sense of perfectionism that you might have. And maybe there are times where there's a lot happening during the day and you don't have time to process how you feel about each thing in the moment. So your brain may be trying to figure out how you actually feel about all those different things that happened during the day that your subconscious took note of, but that you didn't really have time to go through because so much was happening. So at night, your subconscious has time to sort of work through that stuff. So that's another theory for why we have dreams and nightmares. One of the favorite theories is that there is no purpose for dreams and nightmares at all. So in this theory, I'm sorry about the dog barking. It's not mine. But in the third theory, dreams and nightmares don't serve any evolutionary function at all. So they're just sort of a pointless byproduct of the brain firing during slumber. If they happen to be related to memories, that's just because they're playing off things that you know or have seen, because your brain is your brain, and it's not intended to have a benefit in any way. It's just kind of a side effect of the existence of the brain. So John Allen Hobson and Robert McCarley proposed that dreams are caused by, again, random firing of neurons in the cerebral cortex during the REM period, and that neatly this theory helps explain the irrationality of the mind during REM periods, as according to this theory, the forebrain then creates a story in an attempt to reconcile and make sense of the nonsensical information that's being presented to it. So this would explain sort of the odd nature of many dreams. And actually, in greater detail, it's not the cerebral cortex that's producing the initial signal. It's actually it is the forebrain responding to a signal, but the signal actually is initiated in the brainstem, so way down here, and then that's being processed by the cerebral cortex to create these fantastical situations. I also made a note here that antidepressants and acetaminophen, ibuprofen, and alcoholic beverages are thought to potentially suppress dreams, which is kind of interesting. And melatonin is thought to have the ability to encourage dreams, which again, I don't know enough to know how that might tie in here, but I just thought that would be interesting to add. Another thought, so this is more of the Freudian interpretation of dreams, is that they exist to allow us to live out our childhood fantasies and maybe process childhood traumas that our subconscious is hanging on to. So obviously this isn't true of nightmares, in terms of living out your childhood fantasy. And this would also only be specific for things that are happening, that are your unconscious is aware of, but not your conscious mind. So again, though, I'm not entirely sure why this would be necessary from like an evolutionary perspective. So I almost feel like this has sort of the least validity of the ones that I've talked about so far, and maybe of all of them actually, because you really can't see it having any benefit to live out your childhood fantasies. Or is there a benefit I'm not seeing? Maybe you feel happier deep down, but again, is being happy an evolutionary adaptation? Who knows? Anyway, so fifth theory is threat rehearsal. So this would be very specific to nightmares rather than to dreams. So, and this is sort of one of the more prevalent evolutionary theories, right? Because it would be an evolutionary advantage if you encounter a dangerous scenario to have seen it before. And we know that you tend to dream about things that are bothering you, right? Even if it's abstractly. Sometimes it's very vivid. But, if you encounter, thinking back to my premonitory dreams presentation, if you encounter a lot of smoke in a restaurant, and maybe then you have a dream where the restaurant is on fire and burning down. Well, if you frequent that place a lot, then that would be a very clear scenario in which, maybe in the dream what, your escape route is out of the building, for example, which is, one of the core tenets of fire safety, as it were. So then next time you're eating in the restaurant and a fire does happen to break out, you know exactly how you're going to flee. And again, it's difficult to prove any of these things, but for animals, we can kind of tell that they may engage in some threat rehearsal, because animals like cats and dogs do appear at times to act out threatened behavior in their body language as they're asleep, which, it's not proof, but it might indicate that they're having a nightmare or dreaming of some bad thing. So they're going through dream rehearsal, or threat rehearsal, I should say. So it indicates that, we humans might not be the only ones who have these sorts of dreams, and, it may have transcended, down the line of vertebrates. This makes it more evolutionary. And then theory 6 is that dreams are an attempt to solve problems. And this is certainly true looking at last week's presentation, where we were talking about things that happen to like all these scientists, for example, where they were like working on problems and they were really stuck on something, and then they all tended to have dreams, or at least they claimed they did, that solved the problem or showed them the dimensional structure of this particular molecule or something like that. Like, that's a very common story in some of these older, scientific stories. So that's certainly, but again, like, is this the intention of the dream? This is the thing that you have to come back to. Or is it just that you've been wrapping your brain around the problem so long that then when those brainstem, firings cause your cerebral cortex to, interpret things, it's just working off of what you've been focused on for so long, right? Like, I guess, it doesn't have to be intended to do that, obviously, for evolution to be evolution. So maybe dreams are intended to solve problems. So that's a fine theory, I would say. And then this is not a theory of why we have nightmares, but I just it was difficult to find literature addressing the direct problem, and I thought that this would be one last interesting thing to tack on. So correlations between nightmares and bad dreams and your mental health, like mental well-being. So this was a study on college students that differentiated between bad dreams and nightmares. So in order for something to be classified as a nightmare by their standard, you would have to wake up from it, whereas a bad dream is just a nightmare that you don't wake up from. Like, it's not scary enough or whatever to wake you up. So that's the distinction they made. And they did find that students who had frequent nightmares were also more likely to have neuroticism, trait anxiety, state anxiety, depression, and then also a symptom index and well-being composite, which is kind of like general pooled measurements, of well-being. I don't know if you heard that, but I jostled my microphone violently. So, of course, because it's a correlation study, we don't really know if this means that poor mental health state is causing the nightmares, or if the constant nightmares are leaving these people constantly on edge, and more neurotic, etc. But my guess would be that it's the life that's affecting the dreams, and that it's probably also a negative feedback loop. So just the more of a bad state you're in, the more nightmares you have, and also the more nightmares you have, the more of a bad state you're in. Again, this wouldn't be evolutionary purpose, but it might tie in a bit to why the nightmares are occurring if you're in a bad mental state. Anyway, that's about it for the presentation. Bit of a shorter one this week. But I think next week we're going to talk about, like, I kind of like started going down the rabbit hole again in terms of memory, and I think repressed memories in dreams and just especially nightmares could be an interesting topic next week. I'll mention that again before the end. Let's check out some of the comments here. Hi. It's interesting. No harm in going into some of the science of nightmares. Yeah. I have pretty much never had a happy fantasy dream. Dreams are always either disturbing or upsetting. You've never had a good dream? I don't know if I believe that. What about... Oh yeah, you're calling them disturbing. I have dreams that might be classified as disturbing, but I just kind of find them interesting. I appreciate those ones. Dreams do solve problems too, but usually when a problem is solved in sleep, it's not in a dream. I just insert the need in my head at bedtime, and the answer is there in the morning. Interesting. Or maybe you don't remember the dream. Yeah, but you're right. There's some truth to that as well, and that could be, as we've seen in some of these cases, there's processing that's happening that's not related to dreams. That's more related to sleep. There was a lot on sleep in general that wasn't related to dreams, but again, like, I'm trying to stay on topic to the best of my ability. But at this point, let's check out some nightmares from Reddit. Whoops. This is a post by a user named DistinctFly9872. The post is titled, "Been having disgusting recurring nightmares. Need advice." The post reads, "So yeah, it's pretty whack lately. I'll be in my dreams and usually nothing special is happening, or something random, not really the stuff I remember. But out of nowhere, I'll hear a blood-curdling scream of a girl, and it will happen repeatedly, and it just sounds so awful, and I feel like in my dream I know she's trapped and can't escape. I also envision this same setting almost every night. I/we, my family live in this house next to this single old dude who seems to be abducting girls. But no way we can prove it. Messed up. So messed up. I don't know how to even begin to describe it the first time I had these dreams. It focused on him and mother-daughter he kidnapped. I thought that it was some of the most effed ass crap I've ever seen in a dream." I'm trying not to swear because apparently YouTube algorithm stuff, Now, almost every night when I go to sleep, I hear those screams. I'm wondering if my subconscious is telling me something, or what, but I really just want this to stop. So unsettling, especially how real it sounds. Yeah, when they mentioned the part about my family live in a house next to a single old dude who seems to be abducting girls, that sounded like it wasn't even intended to be part of the dream, although I reckon it is. But I wonder if you do live next to a single old dude, and if maybe you have your suspicions about him. Maybe he just creeps you out on some level that you can't understand. My mother tells this story about this teacher at my older brother's elementary school, and she always had a bad vibe about him. And like 10, 15 years later, he went to prison because he was propositioning one of his students, I think. And again, this is like a 12-year-old, so not a good dude, but it's like your subconscious picks up on things that your conscious mind isn't necessarily aware of. Any single old dude living in a house is always abducting girls. I don't know if that's fair to say. I don't know if we can level that accusation. What am I doing? I was trying to bring up the dream chart to see if there's anything else. The good old dream chart. Okay, so the house represents the entire psyche. Again, I don't think that's the focus here. You know what? I'm pretty sure there's nothing on the dream chart we need to look at. I think my analysis was pretty solid, if I can give myself that pat on the back. Yeah, it's probably subconscious trying to tell you something. Like if the guy's real. If the guy's not real, then it becomes more complicated, right? Because then you have to like identify what the guy represents. More comments here. He was at your younger brother's school also. This is my mom in the comments. Yeah, okay, there you go. Seen that old dude movie at least 6 times. Okay, fair enough. Let's check out another nightmare. This is a post by a user named Equinox Games 7. The post is titled, "This one woke me up crying." The post reads, "I wasn't sure why, but in the nightmare I was sneaking through a neighborhood, jumping fences, etc., trespassing. Then I turn a corner, and a schoolgirl sees me and immediately starts screaming as I was an intruder on their property. I force my hands over her mouth, and then, out of nowhere, I quickly and violently snap her neck. Somehow, the news of this cold-blooded murder got around incredibly quickly. The first thing that happened was a call from my girlfriend. She knows what I did, and promptly is disgusted and leaves me. The disappointment and terror in her voice effing crushed me, and I'm surprised I didn't wake up then and there. But there's much more. The family of the girl I killed catches me, and they capture me. I'm brought into a room on a torture chair. This is when I notice the girl's family members' faces are all the faces of my friends and family. My mom, grandfather, stepdad, all there, and they all looked ready to effing slaughter me. It was much worse. Without going into detail, they tortured and killed me in dozens of ways. That all involved bringing me back to life so I could feel more and more pain. The moment I woke up was when a person with my mom's face promised to bring me back without a mouth so that I couldn't scream. I sobbed for mercy and screamed for help and woke up in a similar state. My pillow was wet with tears. This dream effed me up for like an hour while I was still in bed after having woken up. How the goddamn F did my brain conjure something so unbelievably horrible? I felt pathetic and tired the whole day. Just needed to share this one. Well, I think this one also has a pretty easy interpretation. And that interpretation is that you're very guilty about something. I don't even have to look at the dream chart at this point. I've seen enough of these. So first of all, though, we will bring up the dream chart just because it's stuff that I wrote down from stuff that I read, and that's kind of nice to look at, actually. So if you look at the bottom, the very last entry on the dream chart, it says being the aggressor. And then next to that it says feelings of guilt or being afraid about getting caught with something that you're hiding. And in the case of this dream, you get caught like extremely fast. So I think that it's more likely to be the feelings of guilt. And in some regard, you probably feel, whoops, don't want to close anything. Okay, I think we're good. What am I saying? Yeah, so, like, I don't know whether it's that you feel that you wronged your family member specifically, but the vibe I get from it is more that you're ashamed of something that you've done, that you're afraid will come back to your family. I think that's more likely what it is. I wouldn't even really call, like you mentioned, that there are people in her family that seem like your family members, so you could call that an imposter nightmare, which by definition is just individuals who imposters, right? So it's not your mother, but they actually, they're wearing your mother's face or whatever. But in this context, I feel like it is your mother. Like, I don't think that these are imposters. Like, I think that you are upset about your family recognizing something that you've done, and it's up to you to figure out what that might be, and wipe your conscience clean one way or another, either just by like admitting it to them, and or just deciding that what you did wasn't even that bad, whatever it is. That's almost certainly what's going on in that nightmare. This is a post by a user named CopperPetra85. The post is titled, "Too Disturbed to Sleep." The post reads, "I feel like I need to get this dream out into the ether because it's eating me up inside and I can't sleep. Excuse me. I had this dream last night, which is not in a pleasant way to enter into the new year, and while I don't consider myself to be superstitious, it gives me very bad vibes about 2021. In this dream, I, along with a group of young men and women, are in our underwear and in my house. There's a man, sometimes morphs into a woman, who's keeping us all in my bedroom, and it is clear that he's there to torture and kill us. He says to the men about what he's going to do to us women and makes them volunteer in our place. He then takes those men downstairs and tortures them to death. We can hear the screams. At times, I have to fetch things for him. I can see my living room is covered in blood and flayed bodies are hanging everywhere. The visuals are horrifically graphic. The dream morphs slightly. The man turns into a woman and claims to be my grandmother, but is maybe in her 40s, and it's nothing like my grandmother. And she details how she has killed all of the men in our family. As she describes this, I hide in the wardrobe, but the visual of what she describes doesn't go away. She turned them into a rope of flesh. It again was very graphical, and I looked like hair from a clogged drain. Oh, they looked like hair from a clogged drain, all connected and clumped, but it was clearly flesh, kind of like War of the Worlds. The dream morphs again, and my house has become a hotel, and many of us are trying to escape by climbing out the window and onto balconies of other rooms. I somehow escape with a baby that is apparently mine. I don't have kids, and most horrifically, the baby's dummy has been sewn onto its mouth, and I don't know where and I know the woman has done this, the woman pretending to be her grandmother. I keep trying to pull myself out of this dream, but every time I fell asleep, I was back in it. Sometimes it repeated itself, and sometimes I was in the car chase with the man-woman trying to get a vet, not a doctor, a vet, to unsew the baby's mouth. I don't think I've ever had such a horrifying, graphic, disturbing dream. There's no basis for it. I don't watch horror films. I didn't eat anything weird. And I don't take any meds. I'm now terrified that when I fall asleep, this nightmare is going to come back. I hope by purging it of my brain, it will leave me alone and never come back. The baby especially haunts me." So there's an unbelievable amount of themes in this dream. This is like unreal. Like, it's unreal how like packed they are. But actually, before we even get into the specific themes, I just want to give you my first impression of this nightmare. So my first impression is that it's about coronavirus. I don't know if you're like single, but like some of this, the fact that they have like the men and the women separated, right? So like you can't go to different, you can't really date effectively, that type of thing. If you're not single, then this falls apart. But whatever, I'm going with my first impression. And the fact that you're wearing your underwear as well, but it's not like in a shameful way. Like there's a theme for when you're being naked and ashamed, that would mean that you're like afraid of your like bodily appearance, but I'm not getting that vibe from this. Like it seems just like a very casual, everyone's in their underwear. And then the men all get tortured and killed. And I mean, we know that coronavirus affects men more severely than women, so that could be part of it. Also, the entity that's pretending to be your grandmother, and that at times morphs between like woman and man. Like maybe you could say it's genderless, so that also makes me think corona or whatever, right? Because it's like non-human essentially. That's facilitating this horrific thing. I don't know if there's necessarily, from my own first impression, I didn't really get anything specific out of the fact that they're being turned into ropes of flesh. But then later on, there were other things that popped up. Yeah, so the baby, I mean, again, this could be like, I don't know, like dating fears. Like maybe you feel like, okay, we gotta get the dream chart out. So there's a thing called silent screams. So you feel like you don't have a voice, or you aren't being heard in life, or you feel helpless or frustrated in some situation. And in this nightmare, it's not you, but the baby that has its mouth sewn shut, or whatever it was. Something was blocking its mouth. So could be, a feeling of helplessness about that. So again, like maybe if you're like single, you feel like if the lockdown continues forever, like if you're not able to date forever, that then you're also missing out on like your genetic potential, right? Like you're not going to be able to have kids if you can't date, that type of. So that's the first impression that I get from the nightmare, and especially because you at the start of it kind of related it to the new year, although you didn't make a connection between the new year and the dream. The fact that you mentioned it first, like when it isn't really relevant, maybe makes me think that maybe your subconscious is clinging to that. So maybe your subconscious, even while typing it, was kind of continuing to tell a story. Maybe I did touch on all of the things in the dream chart that I wanted to. Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, the only other thing was that you hid in the closet from it, which again would be that would fall into the category of being a chased nightmare. So the manner in which you flee, I don't know if you can see that. No, you probably can't. You can't see my mouse when it's on the screen, sorry. But like if you look at being chased, the manner in which you flee or hide indicates the manner in which you avoid conflict in real life. And your grandmother, the shape-shifting thing, which I'm deciding arbitrarily represents corona, the way that you're dealing with it is not running away, not running out of your house, it's hiding in your closet. So that like perfectly reflects quarantine, as it's describing to you what it's doing to all these other people. I feel like so sure of myself that it's about corona at this point. I feel like I just talked myself more and more into it. Let's see what the comments have to say, because I think they touch on this a bit. Baby could be herself that she's trying to protect, trying to escape the house, might be trying to escape herself in some way. The baby knows something the adult self does not know, and it could be a trauma memory. That's a fine interpretation there in the comments. I like mine better, but that's fine. We're all entitled to our own opinions. Anyway, I hope you liked my interpretation. Hope it did something for you if you watched this. Here's another one. This is a post by a user named LucidDreams6. The post reads, the post is titled, every single night. The post reads, I feel like I'm going crazy. Every night I go through different terror, and the memories haunt me for months. I remember my first nightmare when I was like 5, vividly so too. The nightmares are usually revolving around horrific gore scenery. I feel everything I feel every ounce of pain and emotion. Even if I happen to be lucid in the dream, I can't stop it. I've been doing everything I can not to fall asleep, but dealing with school and everyday life without sleep isn't easy. I cannot express how disturbing they are. Last night I had a shooter that looked like my father shoot holes all through my body while screaming about how I'm not his daughter, tearing me apart, cutting into my eyes, slitting my throat with a paper cutter. The environment was always gloomy and dark, and it's a place near my house. Today I heard my grandfather scream my name from the outside. He wasn't there when I got down. I'm hearing crackling and thumping against my window, but I live on the 3rd floor. It's 10:39 p.m. I don't want to go through this again. My therapist gave me some antidepressants that don't do jack shit. I've been diagnosed with clinical depression, and she said it might be the cause, but literally nothing is happening. Please, if anyone is experiencing this, please tell me what to do. Please, I'm desperate. I mean, it could be quarantine nightmares every single night. When did it start? Oh, since they were 5. Wow, okay. I mean, I can only really analyze the nightmare that was specified here, which is about a shooter that looked like my father shot holes all over my body while screaming about how I'm not his daughter, and then basically just cutting her up with various manners. I actually forget what the significance of the imposter is in nightmares. But again, like if I do take it to be your father, it could be that you feel, some feeling of guilt, or that you feel disconnected from him somehow. Normally, if you were feeling disconnected, though, it would be you seeing him in a compromised position, so him dead or suffering in some regard. That would normally be a guilty feeling towards, feeling like the need to repair something. In this case, again, like, it doesn't go into what the relationship with the father is. As I just read, antidepressants are supposed to, well, in some research, suppress like dreams from even occurring in the first place, but evidently that's not working. I don't know. It does sound like maybe it could be a repressed trauma memory, as my comments are suggesting. Like maybe you feel like you're adopted or something. You're like because apparently babies remember that forever subconsciously. Like even if you were like given up for adoption for a brief period of time, like even if you were adopted like instantly, you never forget like your birth parents fully, like in your subconscious. So it could be something like that. Also, even if you were given up for adoption and then taken back, you still will have like trauma, and you still might remember that in your subconscious. Again, I like, the only thing I really have to go on here is to look into the relationship with your father and like see if there's something there that's bothering you, and then address that more directly, as hard as it might be. That's like the best thing I can suggest. And if you're sure that it's not your father in the dream, I'd have to look. I really want to check this out just real quick. Like the meaning of seeing an imposter in your nightmares. Oh, I don't want to do that. Imposter. Sorry. This is unprofessional. Whatever. You can look it up yourself. Because if you think that it's actually not your dad in the dream, then look up what the meaning of an imposter is in the dream, because I don't recall. Sorry about that. It's a lot of pressure I'm putting on myself trying to like do that research live. So I'm just going to move on for now. But if it is your father, then I hope that would have been a good advice. This is a post by a user named Nerds Are For Nerds. The post is titled, "I would not wish this nightmare on anyone." The post reads, "In this nightmare, I was in my elementary school parking lot. I'm in middle school, and I haven't been to my elementary school in a few years, so this setting was strange. This alone was a little strange. It was completely dark. On the other side of the parking lot, there was a short humanoid thing. When I went up to it, it was an old man who sort of looked like my great uncle. He reached up to grab me, and when I tried to stop his hand from grabbing me, my hand just went through his wrist. He grabbed me, and my nightmare went dark. I woke up to get water, and then went back to bed. When I fell asleep, my nightmare continued. It was kind of weird, but it wasn't the worst of it. I woke up from him grabbing me, and I was in an abandoned-looking hospital thing. I looked around. It was dark and cluttered with equipment. There was a window in front of me, and when looking back on it, I think I was for viewing surgeries. It was covered in blood, and when I would try to wipe it away, it would all come back in a few seconds. But in the time between me wiping the blood and it coming back, I saw the man. He was in a clown costume. No makeup, just the nose, wig, and jumpsuit. That morning, I saw a costume in the store that looked like the one in the dream. It's just stupid and stuff, but I really wanted to share it. Edit. If you know anything about this dream or recognize any details, please tell me because I'd like to find the origin of this dream." Well, I've certainly never had that dream personally. You said that he looked like your grandfather. And it seems like clearly from the, physical interaction that you had that it is a ghost or something of that nature. And I can't help but wonder, the middle school thing doesn't connect with this particular interpretation, but I wonder if you had a grandfather that died in the hospital, and every time you tried, to wipe the blood, that's you trying to repress it. Again, I'm going with a feeling of guilt because, to be consistent, right? And because I do think that it's probably accurate. In terms of seeing a dead relative, that usually indicates guilt. So let's bring up the dream chart, just so you know I'm not lying. Even though I wrote this down, but it's from stuff that I read. So where is it? Seeing the dead. There you go. So seeing a dead person you don't know indicates anxiety about personal illness. Seeing a dead person you know can indicate struggling with grief. So that could be it, right? And then when you wipe the blood away from the window and it just keeps coming back, that could be because you're trying to bury something rather than deal with it. Possibility. And then seeing a person who's still alive in real life as a dead person can mean you're feeling guilty about some aspect of your relationship with them. Yeah, I guess if your grandfather's still alive, then that could also be the case. Seeing an imposter in your dream can also be a warning. Oh, sorry, let me back up. An imposter in your dream is a sign that someone in your life is not who they appear to be, or that they are untrustworthy in some way. Seeing an imposter in your dream can also be a warning to protect yourself, your information, and your psychological space. Interesting. So that would be for the previous person. Yeah, so again, if it's an adoptive father, and maybe you know that subconsciously, that could be why it's a shooter who looks like your father, saying that he's not your daughter. Again, I'm getting an adoption vibe from that one. But moving along, this is a post by a user named Austin James Callie, maybe. The post is titled Clay Men. The post reads, "I had a dream I was in this large underground area with these old decrepit Victorian houses that were all abandoned and falling apart, and it was me and two other guys who were trying to escape through various methods. There was like a tube or something sticking out from the wall, and we were trying to reach because it was very tight, and little walls on this concrete bricks with no visible exit. Instead of a floor, there were just these swampy water, and you couldn't tell how deep it was. Excuse me. I was traversing one of the rooftops, and there was a step ladder around one of the corners that I had to keep stepping around. And I turned around, and I had this feeling that I knew what was going to happen before it did. And I saw my friend running along the swampy water away from all these clay men coming at him from the walls. They were seeping out of the brickwork and walking towards him quickly. I yelled at him that there's a ladder on that side of the building. I don't really know how I knew, but I just did. And he ran around and was able to run the ladder all the way up to this two-story Victorian building to the roof I was on. He scrambled up the ladder, and we ran towards each other, and I kicked the ladder down as the clay men were climbing up it, but they just instantly molded together into this clay mound of flesh and just absorbed him into itself. I dragged him away before they completely absorbed him and started clawing away the clay from his body because it was trying to make its way into his mouth, and I looked closer, and it was seeping into his fingernails, his pores, and I looked at his face, and it's coming out of his eyes and ears and turning him into a clay man from the inside out. So I ran back to the rooftop from the stairwell I came down, and shouted at the other dude that we need to find a way out, and now my memory's fuzzy. I think we were able to find a way to drag the ladder all the way up to the tube and break out. We busted through the glass, and it turned into a side-scrolling 2D area where, I don't remember. If I remember later, I'll add it here. Thanks for reading. Clay man. That's tough. I mean, it's a chase nightmare, right? So we can look at that. The monster itself is going to take some real leaps and bounds on my part, but we'll look at chasing nightmares, right? So again, being chased indicates that you may be avoiding some confrontation in real life from either another person or situation. And the manner in which you flee indicates the manner in which you avoid conflict in real life. So, I mean, I don't know. Like the first interpretation I have is that because it's you and your friends getting chased, and then the monster is going to be difficult to explain no matter what, right? But maybe your friend is in a new relationship and he isn't spending as much time with you, and you're trying to pull him away from the clay ball, which is, the new relationship or whatever, and you're not succeeding. It's just getting in through every pore, and then you and your other buddy just run away further to try to, put more distance between getting into that situation yourselves. Could be something like that. I don't know what stage you're at in your life, but depending on what it is, it could be something along those lines. Another part of me thinks it could also be Corona, but I don't want to just dump that for every single nightmare because, just the way that it's getting inside the body. But I feel like my first interpretation is actually better. That's a tough one though. Again, you would have to have a better analysis of what the monster might represent than I do, but I can tell you that the nightmare where you're running away means that you feel that you're avoiding some conflict in real life. And it could be telling your buddy that you want to hang out with him more, something like that. It's the best I can do, I'm afraid. This is a post by a user named Chael809. The post is titled Expanding from Dot Size Nightmare. The post reads, "Since I was a child, I've had these nightmares which make me hallucinate, and recently I was having a conversation with my son because he was also waking up and hallucinating. He then explained to me the nightmares he was having, and that they were exactly like the ones I was having. It starts by you just being in what seems like a light cream-colored room. Not white, cream. And then you look at a certain spot of the room, and there's this really small black dot, which starts rapidly expanding, and you feel very scared and concerned for what I will say to... and concerned for what I will say is family members, friends, and humanity. Okay, almost as if this is your fault, which causes you to wake up frantically and act as a crazy person. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? If so, can you explain a bit what it looks like and how you act in your own experience? I have never had anything like that. There is one comment who has had something like that, though. Why are you calling it a hallucination? So that makes me think that you're like... Because if it's a hallucination, that implies that you are awake, which would make it sleep paralysis, and I could talk about that. But then you also mentioned that you're in a room that's cream color, and your son is also having this nightmare. So that makes me think that it's a dream, because it's like a defined space that doesn't exist in the real world. A black small dot that expands. Sorry, sometimes I just think I see things and I freak out, but that's okay. So you have a black small dot that expands to the size of like a black hole, just consumes everything. Oh man, I feel like I would have to do some real rumination on what that could be. Cream colored rim. Like a hospital. No, a hospital would be white. I actually am like completely lost on that one. You feel like it's your fault. So I mean, like at the very least, you know that it's a feeling of guilt. Is it a black spot specifically? Yeah, it's black. I mean, the other thing that we could call it is an apocalypse nightmare, so we can look at it in that, like, apocalypse dreams can indicate that a big change is happening in your life, right? Because it's kind of like a thing that's just taking over the universe. So that, coupled with it being a feeling of guilt, and yeah, I mean, what did I just say? I'm like confusing myself. A big change is happening in your life and you feel guilty about it. Yeah, I don't know. Make of that what you will. That's the best I can do for that one. Like, you feel guilty about some big change that you think is going to affect other people. Whatever that you think that could be. That's the best I can do. That's a tough one. This is a post by a user named AvidoBombQ. The post is titled Instagram Killer. So I had a dream where I was on a school party because it was the last year of school in the dream. So I checked social media one time and suddenly I had an Instagram name in my head, but I don't remember, and searched for it. It was at first a normal man who was just enjoying life, but then his normal pictures disappeared. It was disturbing pictures of myself where he stabbed himself, and things like this, but he was alive. So I was shocked and didn't say anything to other people. I ended up in a house which I don't know who it belongs to. So I looked in the mirror and saw myself as a scary person, which was inhuman. He had a very big head, and a big head with a very big smile, and grayish with some red blood spatters on him. So I ran through the house because this unhuman creature came straight out of the mirror and chased me. I don't remember what happened then, but I remember at the end I saw a person in that house sitting on the couch, and the monster killer sneaked up to him, and before him he looked at me and smiled and waved, then rammed an axe through his head. I wasn't myself as a person. I saw through was a kind of camera that I saw through. So yeah, pretty scary, and it sounded like it came straight out of a horror movie. That is tough. Seeing yourself as a monster, but it's also like through a pinhole camera. I mean, seeing a guy harming himself Did I put suicide on the dream chart? Looks like I didn't put suicide on the dream chart. There's a lot of things that I should add to the dream chart, but I never seem to remember until it comes up. But again, like someone being injured, that's so confusing. It turns into like some big monster where it starts chasing other people. I don't know. That's so tough. These are some tough ones. These are some challenging nightmares tonight. A very big head and a big smile. I looked in the mirror and saw myself. Like, so are you working together with the guy at the end of the nightmare? Like you've both sort of become freakish versions of yourselves? And there's a random person. Maybe you feel, I don't know, like he mentions at the end that he's 14. Like maybe he and somebody like pranked somebody and he feels guilty about that. Big head and a big smile. It sounds like you feel like you're maybe in like the wrong group of friends or something. Like you feel like you don't recognize this version of yourself in the mirror. And the guy who seems to be your accomplice at the end when you're kind of like attacking this dude in their house. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's your house. Like maybe, and again, I'm not sure if this is a guy or a girl, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. Like at that age, like because he bothers to mention his age, I don't know. Like maybe again, subconsciously he thinks that that's important. Maybe he recognizes that, you know, these like sort of like social circles that he has, like he doesn't like them. I think that's probably my best interpretation of this. It's just that he's not pleased with his social circle, and maybe he feels like he doesn't recognize himself when he's with them. That's the best I can do with that. Hope that helps. Oh, there are so many left that I wanted to read. I have been thinking about extending Nightmare Theater to be an hour and a half. But we'll talk about that another time. So this is a post by a user named JAH. And the post is titled, I am 36 and had the first nightmare of my entire life last night. Wow. The post reads, usually, growing up, the worst dreams I had were dreams where I was faced with an unsolvable problem, like a math problem, a puzzle, or a maze. I wouldn't wake up terrified, but I would wake up with my brain hurting. Even though I considered these bad dreams, I never classified them as nightmares. Anyway, it's been a few years since I had one of those dreams. Last night was different. I didn't get to bed until a little after 2 a.m. last night, and I started to dream immediately. Not possible, but that's fine. I was a kid again, and I was playing in the backyard. There was a wooden fence, and I managed to crawl underneath and on the other side. I fell into a pit, about a couple feet deep. I tried to climb back out through the space at the bottom of the fence, but I was too big and couldn't fit. I tried several times, then my cousin squeezed through a hole and joined me in the pit. He was helping me by pulling out a few pieces of wood at the bottom of the fence and making the hole bigger. When I attempted to climb through the hole again, a monster or demon's face appeared in the hole. The face was half wood and half green with mud on it. I guess it looked like some kind of forest demon. The face reminded me of the mask in the movie The Mask before Jim Carrey put it on. I was trapped and I was face to face with a demon. When the face appeared in the hole, I started screaming and screaming, and I didn't wake up until my wife shook me awake. She describes my screams like being more like dog whimpers. She was freaked out. When I looked at the clock, it was only 2:40. We couldn't sleep for some time after that. Interesting. Yeah, so some time did pass before the nightmare happened, which makes more sense to me. But anyway, onto the interpretation. So this strikes me as being a being trapped nightmare. We'll get to the demon aspect of it later. So being trapped somewhere around the middle, you'll notice, says can indicate that you have claustrophobic anxiety, and I don't think that's the case here. And then it also says without claustrophobia, it can indicate that you feel you're being held back from reaching your potential somehow. So, and then the examples here are unhealthy relationship or dead-end job. And again, I don't know anything about your job or your relationship, so I can't really comment on either of those. But it could be any aspect of your life. It doesn't have to be confined to those. And then the other thing to consider is what does this demon represent? Because that would be directly related to, what it is. Wait, you were a kid though. This could also have, potential. So because you got bigger, right, at some point in the dream? Tried to climb back through the space at the bottom, but I was too big and couldn't fit. So maybe it feels like there was something that you were free to do when you were a kid that now you can't do as an adult, because like you grew too big to get back through that hole. That could be, a possible like angle that you could take on it. And usually the only thing that you have as a kid that you don't have as an adult is, I don't know, the freedom from responsibility. Like, could you really even call being trapped? So yeah, you're being held back from reaching your potential. Yeah, it's hard to imagine what potential you could reach as a kid that you can't reach as an adult. And maybe it is just the feeling of being trapped in responsibility. That could be it. And then what could the demon represent? It looks like a mask, and it looks like it's made out of wood and mud. Wood and mud. And it's blocking the hole. Wood and mud. I'm like, again, that's something like nature, like that's kind of the vibe I get from that, but that's something that I associate more with childhood personally, and it's not something that you'd ever really associate with holding you back. I don't know, unless maybe you moved to the country and there's like less opportunities there. I don't know, the mask is a tricky one, but I would maybe think about that on your own. Think about what that could represent, and then also think about the whole like kid growing thing. I'm looking at my chat now. What about themes revolving around murder? I dreamt I murdered someone, accidentally I think, and I was extremely anxious in the dream because I was worried I'd get caught. This happened during exam season, probably since I constantly have an underlying fear of performing poorly. Okay, well, we actually had, I think, nightmares that discussed those things very directly earlier. Yeah, but being the aggressor and murdering someone does mean that you have a feeling of guilt, or you're afraid that you're going to get caught with something that you're hiding. And then also missing important events or performance anxiety on a test does mean that you're like a perfectionist. I feel like you kind of analyze that one yourself. The fact that it's, yeah, I also used to constantly have that like right after an exam season. So like that one's like fairly easy to interpret. It's just like, yeah. Oh yeah, but the fact, sorry, that you think you had the nightmare during exam season, but the nightmare was about murdering someone. Feelings of guilt. I mean, it could be maybe you're like during exam season, you're stressed out and you're focused on, dealing with that aspect of things. So you're ignoring someone in your life. That could be it. You're kind of like neglecting some of the other people and you feel guilty about that. That's one possible thought. Interesting. I worry in real life about being accused of murders I didn't commit because of hearing about Stephen Truscott case when I was little. I'm not familiar with that case myself. But I do think I should stop. Or should I continue? I kind of want to, yeah, as I was saying, with Nightmare Theater, I think the plan is to at some point start getting like guests on the call with me. I don't want to like talk about things too early though, but like maybe after like episode 25 or so, or once I have like a big enough like audience that like people want to come on the show. But like I think that would make things a lot more interesting, and also at some point like I am hoping that I'm going to get more viewer submissions, and at that point at both of those points I'm going to have to extend the time of Nightmare Theater to maybe like 10:30 or to 11. So like it might be fun just to even like continue at some point, keep the stream going later, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to end it now. I always feel guilty of neglecting my family members, especially my brother. That could be it then. Maybe think about like who you murdered in that dream. Like could maybe reflect on that better. But that's it for tonight. Subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss next week's stream and also my Thursday videos. Send me your own nightmares to theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I'd love to read them next week live and interpret them to the best of my ability. Again, I'm also going to think about extending the length of the stream, but we'll talk about that later. Next week's presentation is going to be about repressed memories in dreams and nightmares, so that should be pretty interesting. And I think that's about it. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.